The scene is almost dreamlike. The wind is howling across the surface of the water, the waves are restless, and the night sky above is heavy with darkness. In the distance, the faint outline of a man begins to take shape, moving steadily across the shifting surface of the sea. The disciples, exhausted from fighting against the wind, are filled with fear at the sight. This is the moment the Gospels describe: Jesus walking on the water. For many, this miracle stands among the most astonishing events in the life of Christ. It is a direct confrontation with the laws of nature, a quiet yet undeniable declaration that the elements themselves submit to his authority. Water, which cannot be grasped or solidified by human effort, holds him up as if it were firm ground. In the minds of those who witnessed it, such a sight could only confirm his divine power. The impossible before their eyes had become reality. And yet, the question lingers: was this moment entirely without precedent? Was this the first time that a human eye had seen someone walking where the sea should have swallowed their steps? Most readers of the Gospels do not pause to ask such questions, perhaps because the moment is so breathtaking on its own. Yet hidden within the ancient songs of Israel, in the poetic verses of the Psalms, lies imagery that sounds strikingly familiar. The Psalms, often sung as worship and prayer, are also rich with descriptions of God's power over creation. They paint vivid pictures of the seas obeying his command, of waters parting at his will, of chaos itself bending to his rule. For ancient Israel, the sea was more than just a physical reality. It was a symbol of forces beyond human control. To walk on water, to stride across the depths without sinking, was to act with absolute authority over creation itself. As we begin to trace these ancient threads, a subtle mystery emerges. The Gospels tell us that Jesus walked on water to reach his disciples in their hour of fear, but the Psalms had long spoken of a figure who treads the sea's calms, the waves, and moves across the waters in ways beyond human ability. These verses do not speak of myth, but of the living God in action. Could it be that the miracle on the Galilean lake was not a standalone event, but rather a deliberate echo of something already revealed centuries earlier? The invitation, then, is to set aside what is familiar and look again. The story of Jesus walking on water may not have been the first time such a feat was described. In the ancient poetry of Israel, a pattern is hidden in plain sight, waiting to be recognized. It is a pattern that begins not on a quiet lake in the New Testament, but in the deep, rhythmic language of the Psalms, where God himself is portrayed as treading the very waves. If we are willing to read with open eyes, we may discover that this miracle was not only a demonstration of power, but a deliberate declaration of identity. The clues are there, woven into verses sung for generations, waiting for the moment when the one who was promised would reveal himself in a way no one could deny. And in that revelation, the impossible becomes reality once again. In the worldview of ancient Israel, the sea was not a tranquil place of rest or beauty. It was often seen as a place of danger, chaos, and mystery. It represented what was untamed, unpredictable, and beyond human mastery. This perception can be traced back to the opening verses of Genesis, where before creation fully takes shape, the Spirit of God hovers over the surface of the waters. From the very beginning, God is shown as not merely present near the waters, but as sovereign over them. The Psalms carry this theme with poetic strength. Psalm 77 describes a scene where the waters writhe at the presence of God, their depths trembling in awe. Psalm 89 speaks of his rule over the surging sea and his ability to still its swelling waves. These are not casual references, they are theological statements. The psalmists understood that for God to command the waters was to demonstrate supreme authority over the most fearsome and uncontrollable forces in existence. In the mind of the ancient Israelite, to walk upon the sea would be the ultimate expression of that authority. The roaring waves and the depths beneath were not simply physical realities, they were symbols of chaos itself. For God to tread upon them would be to declare victory over disorder, over danger, and over every power that opposed his will. The sea could be stirred by the wind and churned into a storm, yet it could be silenced by the word of the Creator. When these psalms were sung, they were not merely remembering past deliverance. They were affirming a present reality. God is Lord of the waters. He commands what no human hand can restrain. In that light, when the gospel accounts describe Jesus walking on the water, it is impossible to miss the connection. He was not just showing compassion by reaching his disciples. He was making a statement understood deeply by those who knew their scriptures. This was the same authority spoken of in the Psalms. It was the God of Israel walking where only he could walk. The disciples, raised on these sacred songs, would have recognized the imagery. They had sung about the one who ruled the waves. Now in the darkness and the wind, they were seeing those words come alive before them. The sea, which had always represented danger and uncertainty, was under the feet of the one who claimed it as his own. Psalm 77 verse 19 reads with a beauty and mystery that lingers in the mind. Your path led through the sea, your way through the mighty waters, though your footprints were not seen. The image here is striking. It speaks of a path that no human eye could trace, a journey across the depths where no one had walked before. This psalm reflects on the great deliverance of Israel through the Red Sea, an event where God's presence led his people to safety while the waters themselves stood aside. Yet the language here seems to reach beyond the memory of Moses and the people crossing on dry ground. The psalmist speaks of God's own path through the sea, a way that leaves no trace. It is as if the writer is telling us that the Almighty himself treads the waters, moving with a power that cannot be measured or marked. The invisible footprints carry a sense of mystery. They remind us that God's work often moves beyond what the human eye can perceive. Even when his presence is undeniable, the way he moves is not always visible. This is a truth that resonates with the gospel scene, where Jesus comes across the water in the night. There is no disturbance left behind him, no wake, no trace, only his approach. For the ancient listener, Psalm 77 would have been a testimony to God's faithfulness in the past, a reminder that he makes a way where none exists. For those who stood in the boat on the Sea of Galilee and watched Jesus walking toward them, it would have been a living illustration of that very truth. The one who had once led Israel through the depths was now treading the waves again, his footprints unseen, but his presence undeniable. In the poetry of the Hebrew Scriptures, the sea often represents more than water. It becomes a picture of the forces that oppose God's order, a place inhabited by creatures like Leviathan, symbols of spiritual resistance and chaos. The sea is where uncertainty dwells, where danger emerges without warning, where the depths conceal threats unseen. Psalm 74 speaks of God breaking the heads of the sea monsters, crushing Leviathan, and drying up mighty rivers. These are images not of gentle nature, but of cosmic conflict. The waters, in this understanding, are the stage upon which God demonstrates his supremacy over every form of opposition. To calm the sea or to walk upon, it is to enact a victory over more than just the physical elements. It is a declaration of triumph over the chaos that defies God's order. When Jesus walked upon the water, he was stepping into this symbolic framework that every first-century Jewish observer would have known. The act was not only about reaching his disciples in distress. It was a visible sign that the forces represented by the sea, confusion, danger, and spiritual resistance were beneath his feet. The calming of storms in the Gospels carries the same weight. When he rebukes the wind and the waves, he is not simply stopping bad weather. He is asserting his dominion over all that the sea represented. To walk on the water, to be unmoved by its instability, is to stand as the undisputed ruler over both the physical and spiritual realms. For those who understood the ancient symbols, the miracle was layered with meaning. It was a statement of spiritual conquest, the visible assurance that chaos, no matter how deep or violent, submits to the authority of the one who walks where only God walks. The connection between Jesus walking on water and the Exodus runs deeper than many realize. The crossing of the Red Sea was a defining moment for Israel, a night when fear gave way to deliverance. When the darkness of danger was split by the power of God, the people passed through what should have been their grave, emerging into freedom on the other side. The Psalms often recall this event with vivid language. They speak of the waters seeing God and trembling, of the depths convulsing at his command. Psalm 106 tells of the sea parting so that his people could pass through, an act of mercy and power. This imagery is not just historical, it is theological. It presents God as the one who commands the waters and uses them to protect his people. On the night when Jesus came to his disciples on the water, the echoes of that Exodus would not have been far from the minds of those who knew their scriptures. Once again, there was fear. Once again, the water stood between safety and despair. And once again, deliverance came through the power of God. Yet this time, the path was not through parted waters on dry ground. This time, the deliverance came by one who walked directly upon the waves themselves. If the Red Sea crossing was a sign of God's saving power, then Jesus' walk was a sign of that power present in their midst in human form. For those who saw it, and for those who later told the story, the connection was more than a poetic resemblance. It was a continuation, a fulfillment. The God who had led his people through the sea in the days of Moses was walking on the water again, not in the form of a pillar of cloud or fire, but in the person of Jesus. Long before the psalmist sang of God's power over the waters, the ancient voice of Job declared a vision that pierced through the mystery of creation. In Job 9 verse 8, we read, "He alone stretches out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea." The words stand in the middle of a speech where Job is describing the greatness of God, his unmatched authority, and his incomprehensible ways. To tread on the sea was not an act of leisure or beauty. It was a statement of absolute supremacy over what no human could master. In Job's time, the sea was the ultimate untamed element. It swallowed ships, defied human control, and represented forces far beyond mortal strength. For a man to walk upon, it was unthinkable. Only the Creator could place his feet where the depths threatened to consume all else. Job's declaration is not a metaphor of possibility. It is a proclamation of divine reality. When the Gospel writers described Jesus walking on the water, they were not simply recording a strange and unexpected event. They were echoing this ancient truth that had been preserved in the Scriptures. The image of one who treads on the waves would have instantly connected their readers to Job's words. The miracle on the Sea of Galilee was not performed in a vacuum. It stood in direct conversation with the testimony of Scripture that had preceded it for centuries. To see Jesus walking on the water was to witness Job's vision take physical form. It was as though the ancient proclamation had stepped out of the sacred text and into living reality. For those who knew the writings of old, this was no coincidence. It was another way of revealing who he was, the same God Job had spoken of, the same Lord who stretched out the heavens and walked across the waves. The night on the lake was more than a miracle. It was a revelation. As the wind roared and the boat pitched in the waves, the disciples saw a figure walking toward them. Fear rose quickly, for no one expected to see a person walking where the sea should have swallowed their steps. But then came the words that pierced the chaos. "It is I, do not be afraid." In the Greek language of the Gospels, the phrase Jesus spoke is ego eimi, which means I am. These are not casual words. They mirror the name God revealed to Moses at the burning bush in Exodus, a name that expressed eternal existence and absolute sovereignty. Spoken in the midst of a storm, these words carried more than comfort, they carried identity. For the disciples, steeped in the Psalms and the writings of the prophets, the connection was immediate. The God who ruled the waters, the one who commanded the waves, was speaking to them in the voice of the man before them. Every element of the scene, the wind, the sea, the darkness, and the fear, was a stage for a divine manifestation. This was not just about getting the disciples safely to the shore. It was about revealing to them who he truly was. In their scriptures, the sea had always been the domain where only God reigned supreme. Now they saw their teacher, their friend, walking upon it as though it were solid ground, declaring himself with the name that belonged to no one else. The storm that night became the backdrop for a moment that would remain with them forever. They did not only see the waves calmed, they saw the identity of the one who could calm them. When Jesus stepped into the boat and the wind died down, the response of the disciples was not relief alone, it was worship. Matthew's gospel tells us that they bowed before him and declared, "Truly you are the Son of God." It is the natural reaction when fear is transformed into awe, when the impossible happens before our eyes. The Psalms provide countless examples of this pattern. Psalm 107 speaks of sailors who were caught in storms, tossed about until their courage melted away. They cried out to the Lord in their distress, and he stilled the storm to a whisper, guiding them to their desired haven. The psalm ends with a call to give thanks and praise for such deliverance. This same movement from fear to worship is found on the lake that night. The disciples had been fighting the wind and waves, perhaps thinking only of survival, until the one who treads on the sea came to them. In an instant, the chaos bowed to his command, and their hearts bowed in response. For those who know the Psalms, this moment rings with familiarity. It is not just about safety, it is about recognition. The calming of the sea is a sign that God is present, and the only fitting response is to worship. The disciples were not only acknowledging what Jesus had done, they were acknowledging who he was. The Psalms had trained them to see the connection. Worship, in this sense, is not born from comfort, but from encounter. It is the natural outpouring one realizes they have been in the presence of the one who commands the sea and the storm. The realization that Jesus was not the first to walk on water changes how we see the event. In the Psalms and the writings of Job, it is God himself who treads upon the waves. When Jesus does the same, it is not merely a display of extraordinary ability. It is a declaration that he shares the same identity, authority, and power. For us, the meaning is deeply personal. The sea in Scripture is more than a body of water. It is a symbol of chaos, fear, and overwhelming forces. We all face moments when life feels like a storm, when we are surrounded by uncertainty and pushed by forces we cannot control. In those moments, the image of Jesus walking on the waves is a reminder that nothing is beyond his reach. The same God who stilled the storm for the disciples still reigns over every storm we face. The same one who treads on the waters walks with us through what feels impossible. We may not see him in the way the disciples did, moving across the surface of a sea in the night, but his presence is no less real. To walk where only God walks is to confront chaos without being consumed by it. It is to move forward even when the path seems impossible. And it is to know that we are not alone in the journey, for the one who commands the waves is with us still. This is the enduring truth of that night on the lake. The miracle was not only for those in the boat, it was for every generation that would face its own storms, reminding them that the one who walked on the water then still walks upon the chaos now. From beginning to end, the Psalms are more than songs of worship. They are a reflection of the Messiah who was to come. Their poetry is filled with images of God's power over creation, his deliverance in times of danger, and his sovereignty over the sea. For centuries, these verses prepared the hearts of the faithful to recognize the one who would fulfill them. When Jesus walked on the water, the act was not isolated from this ancient background. It was the living embodiment of what the Psalms had already described: the God who rules the raging sea, the one whose path is through the waters, the Lord who treads upon the waves. Every step he took on that stormy night was a step in the footprints of the God spoken of in Scripture. The Psalms become a mirror, reflecting the Messiah's identity for all to see. They do not simply hint at him, they frame his actions, give depth to his miracles, and reveal their meaning. The connection between the ancient songs and the New Testament event is not accidental. It is the unfolding of a divine pattern. In this way, the miracle is more than a display of power. It is a declaration that the God of the Psalms and the man walking on the water are one and the same. For the disciples, for the early believers, and for us today, this truth changes how we read both the Old and the New Testaments. The clue is always in the Psalms, waiting for the moment when the Messiah would walk where only God walks. The story we have explored is one of recognition that the miracle on the Sea of Galilee was the continuation and fulfillment of a truth revealed long before. Jesus was not the first to walk on the water. He was showing that he was the same Lord who had done so in the songs of Israel. This understanding draws the Gospels and the Psalms into a single unbroken line of testimony. If this message has brought you new insight or encouragement, take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you will not miss future videos. Like this video to let us know it spoke to you. Share it with friends and family who may be blessed by its message. And leave a comment below with your thoughts or reflections. Your engagement helps this message reach even more people, and your voice is an important part of this ongoing conversation.